€495 in dividends in June sounds impressive, doesn't it? But only €383 net actually landed in my account. Why that's completely normal and how I use my high heel buy and hold strategy to build wealth in the long term, let's take a look at that now. Welcome to MB Capital Strategies. I'm Marco. Here it's all about dividends, market cycles, and the path to financial freedom. Let's get started. So first of all, here's a quick little portfolio update. Currently, we have a portfolio value of €64,701. A total of €66,046 has been invested. At the moment, we have an unrealized capital gain of €1,867 and an intensive fund of 3.02%. Total dividends received. That's €4,120 gross. Plant 1 is planning a dividend of €495 for June 2025. I'll quickly go through the list of what my payers were. Here we have, among others, Enbridge, ConocoPhillips, Damiat Rack, Essential Utilities, Phillips 66, TGS, Global Ship Lease, Glencore, Tor, Orange, Volkswagen, UPS. So quite a few, as I've already introduced before, both in my shorts and in previous videos. I'd say I'll just quickly scroll down for a moment. You can just take a look at what I received in June and what my top highlights were. I'll come back to that in a moment, or rather, I'll touch on that. So what definitely stands out here are the energy companies with €23.06. That's already quite a good value. Then €17.88 from MPC Container Ships, €12.64 from BP, €20.57 from Adaro Energy, and then I also have an iShares Treasury bond here that paid out €9.83 with a current yield of 4.62%. I use this simply because if interest rates are lowered, which is generally expected over the next few years, although it looks less likely for this year depending on how things develop between Trump and Powell. Let's just take a general look at it, but in any case, I'll definitely keep an eye on it. Currently, the price to buy the iShares Treasury bond 20 plus is at a favorable level, and right now it's at 4.62%. This way you can also secure the 4.62% in the long term. Then here we have Flex. LNG with €50.76 for a total of 78 shares. I'll just go through the highest amounts I've received. €13.80 from Petrotal with 12.12%. Then Total Gabon with €22.22 that we received. They pay out annually. Then BW LPG with €28. Zim Integrated Shipping with 14.25%. But I also bought more UPS, we can talk about that again later. Then also Thor with €28.72. So those were, so to speak, the biggest payers that, well, paid out in June. So I would just say, let's talk about which new additional purchases I made and maybe also what the forecast for next year looks like based on the dividends. So we can just go ahead and calculate that as well. The projected dividend for 2026 is €6,666.75. And then we always like to calculate the yield on cost for 2026 in advance. Just so I have a rough idea of where I currently stand. We've invested €66,046.30. If you multiply that by 100, that means, as things stand now, I would have a yield on cost of 10.09% in 2026. So that's for 2026. For 2025, we can also just go ahead and calculate it. Of course, it will probably turn out a bit worse because during the year I also make additional purchases, and a lot of that only counts towards the next year, which means I won't receive it this year due to the cutoff dates. But even so, for 2025, we already have a yield on cost of 8.19%, or rather 8.2%, which I feel is already a pretty good, solid value for how my capital is working. So let's just take a look. At the June purchases, I would say. Actually, I haven't even answered the question yet. So up until about May, it was like this. I still had an exemption order, which applies up to €1,000. Up until then, I basically didn't have to pay any taxes on my dividends, and it was still in effect up to that point. That means everything, let's say, up until April was, theoretically speaking, then more or less gross equals net, except for withholding tax possibly. And as I said, from around May, I had completely used up the exemption order, maybe even earlier. I just have to take a quick look at that right now. In January, it was 85 euros in dividends. In February, 350, then 294 euros. Yes, exactly, roughly speaking. In May, my exemption order of 1,000 euros was definitely used up. And that's why in June, I already had multiple tax deductions, simply. So, as I said, let's just take a look at everything I bought during the period of June. Exactly. So overall, my purchases were at BP. That was a reinvestment of the dividend. Then I bought Peru Sahara, Garcin Yara in 100 euro increments, Medco Energy. Then I bought Tuax. We can also take a quick look at what all of these are. So the previous ones were all basically active in the oil and gas business. You can look up for yourselves how things are currently going there. Exactly. So mobile standardized equipment from Netfile. The company operates in the business areas of freight wagons, river ships, and shipping containers. The company offers freight wagons, including car transport wagons and coil transport cars. Exactly. The current dividend yield of 2.82% is, of course, a bit more conservative, but in my opinion, it was definitely worth buying at one point. Then I had Valterra Platinum here, which I also recommended in a post in the YouTube video. So in my opinion, palladium is generally in good demand anyway. And palladium prices have been very high recently. And the company was actually still in a relatively affordable buying range. That's why I said I'll buy more or I'll buy in. The current dividend is at 3.43, not particularly high. Sure, but for me this is simply a kind of commodity play because palladium was just at a high price. That's why I assume that Valterra Platinum simply generated more capital, meaning it also generated more revenue. Due to the higher prices, they were simply able to pay out more as well. Next year, that was just my line of thinking. And in my opinion, the company was still relatively solid and cheaply valued. That's why I just got in. By now, I have invested 413 euros there. It's also more or less a kind of commodity play. Exactly, and then I'm also invested in Genco Shipping and Trading. As you can see, I generally buy a lot of things with 100 euros, just go in. That's simply because I'm with Scalable and Straight Republic. There, I only have an order fee of 1%, and in my opinion, that puts everything into perspective. Of course, if I see that the entry opportunities are really favorable, I also like to go in with larger amounts, like now with Valterra Platinum. But in general, I usually prefer to invest in amounts of 100 to 200 euros. And I just like to buy in like that, just to get a foot in the door. Exactly, and sometimes it's also the case that I like to buy before the X date when I see, okay, it's still cheaply valued because usually the stock even rises again on the X date. And then on the payout day, it drops. And then I like to buy again right there. When the stock is pushed down by the payout day, Central Asian metals, Vale, Indonesia, I personally also find them somehow interesting. Vale in general is based in Brazil, but now they're in Indonesia. I actually see it as an exciting emerging markets play. Right now I would say they're still in the development phase, so they're not fully integrated yet. Exactly, and primarily they're mainly responsible for mining nickel, so to speak. But you can see that they are generating more and more net income. And in my opinion, it's just simple for 18 cents, an exciting addition to emerging markets. In my view, you can just get in with a small amount. Or, as I did, just invest a certain amount and see how things develop. Who knows, maybe the dividend will even be increased at some point. Then I invested in Global Medical REIT. I also bought more Kraft Heinz, Oxford Lane Capital, Innovative Industrial Properties, energy stocks. I also bought more ZIM. I increased my position in energy stocks again. I also added more to the iShares Treasury Bond. Then Banco do Brasil, Flower Foods, Torm. Torm, which is also in LPG, as I said, was also very cheap at 18 euros and 70 cents. I just had to pick it up right then. Let's also take a look at how things have developed there. So Petrobras and ultra short. I actually invest in ultra short monthly through a savings plan. And here I simply switch over. That means if a stock is currently valued very low, and if it feels like a historically cheap opportunity, like now with UPS or Novo Nordisk, I like to sell the ultra short bond and then basically reallocate. That's what I do if I've already used up the capital I wanted to invest for this month. Then we have Atmos Shipping, Ecopetrol JD. I invested again in Helmerich Champagne, Petróleo Brasileiro. Then I invested in North. In my opinion, North is also an interesting company, just like Helmerich Champagne. And North also sells systems and components for products worldwide, for oil and gas extraction, as well as for renewable energy. That means, of course, when oil and gas are booming, it's naturally a good question because, of course, I also provide maintenance for that, and that actually makes it a cyclical stock as well. That means if oil prices go up, in my opinion, NOF will also rise because demand will be higher, and because the companies then also have more capital available when the oil price is higher, because then they can simply afford more investment. And then I also have Impala. I've also invested in Platinum with a small amount since it's a small stock as well, simply as a platinum play in case platinum rises, so that I can simply benefit from this payout as well. Currently there's an unrealized price gain of 19.80 euros, which corresponds to 30%. And here, at least for now, there is no dividend being paid. But it's definitely something I'm considering buying because currently it was suspended due to the low platinum prices. But if platinum prices rise again, I could imagine that this company would start paying out again. And yes, that would be quite nice. It's just a little side play, I'd say. So I'd almost say that's it for the short portfolio update. You've now seen my dividends, how much I received in June. You've seen which additional purchases I'm making. Just let me know. Let me know what you found most interesting. Feel free to write me what else you would like to see more of. Of course, what's still coming up is another video about BDCs, another video about rates, and another video about my shipping stocks. I have a few of those in my portfolio, and I just break it up a bit so you don't have to sit through 30 minutes straight in one video, and so it's easier to watch, of about 10 minutes. Alright, then I'd say we'll see each other in the next video. Until then, successful investing.